call Eugenie Sage.
Tanaka, Mr Speaker, thank you. The Green Party is pleased to support the Land Transfer Bill to Select Committee. It's quite a technical bill, obviously, so we will be very interested in submissions. The fact that the bill is the government's response to the Law Commission's very comprehensive 2010 report on a new Land Transfer Act and closely resembles the Commission's draft land tenure bill is reassuring. And when the Commission did that report, their recommendations were aimed at modifying, simplifying and consolidating the land transfer legislation because, as others have noted, thank you Mr Bishop, the Act was passed in 1952 and it hasn't been updated for nearly 60 years, so it obviously hasn't kept pace with technology. As the Act was based around a paper-based manual transfer system for land registration, and now land registration is almost entirely electronic. And nor did we see back in the 1950s the same degree of sophistication around mortgagee and mortgage fraud that we are seeing today. So it consolidates three existing pieces of legislation consolidates existing legislation by repealing the Land Transfer Act 52, the Land Transfer Amendment Act and the Land Transfer Computer Registration and Electronic Lodgement Amendment Act. And this whole system of land registration that we have in New Zealand is the basis for secure title, is the basis for people being confident when they buy and sell land, because it ensures that there is a central public register which describes and records all of the material facts which relate to a particular property. It ensures that title is secure and that people don't have to go behind that title to search out relevant information in relation to that particular area of land. And I've only got a very limited understanding of land law and look forward to getting more if I'm on the Select Committee. But the state, through our land transfer system, guarantees indefeasible title. And that means that title can't be annulled or made void, and it protects people or any registered proprietor against the claims of someone who's claiming ownership of that. And it also protects the owner against any encumbrances, and it protects sellers too, any encumbrances or estates or interests which don't appear on the title. So the register is intended to reflect as accurately as possible the true state of title to land, so people don't have to search elsewhere. And the state supports the whole Torrens system by guaranteeing the accuracy of the rights which are registered with the Land Transfer Office. Anyone who is deprived of land or an interest or estate in land because there's been a mistake in the way title is entered in the land title register is entitled to take legal proceedings against the government to recover damages. And so my understanding is that the bill has some new clauses around mortgage fraud and this concept of indefeasible title to clarify the powers that the registrar has to correct the register and around compensation if there has been a loss because of the way the land transfer system has operated. And those powers include giving the High Court the discretion to intervene in cases where there might be an obvious injustice and the discretion to correct and adjust the compensation in certain cases. The bill also requires mortgagees to know the identity of mortgagors as they have no entitlement in cases of identity fraud. My understanding too is that the Law Commission consulted quite widely in developing a draft bill which was tabled in the Parliament, both publicly and with interested stakeholders. But there are still concerns that the Green Party has around the relationship between the Land Transfer Act and Te Ture Whenua Māori Act, which my colleague Marana Davidson will talk about more, because there's further work needed there and perhaps a major investigation. But as other speakers have noted, with the current collapse in dairy prices and this bill dealing with changes to the way land transfers occur, then It's going to have a major impact potentially if there is land sold because of the collapse in the dairy payout, because of the milk lake that we've got in Europe. The signs that the dairy industry changes may be structural rather than just cyclical, and the major stress that a lot of farmers are under. Dairy NZ has predicted that 85% of dairy farmers are unlikely to make a profit this season. A recent Federated Farmers poll shows that 11% of dairy farmers are now under pressure from their banks over their mortgages, and farm consultant Peter Fraser has warned that around 25% are vulnerable. And we've had the Reserve Bank predicting that up to 44% of dairy farm loans in this very heavily indebted industry, where debt totals around $38 billion, are going to be at risk of becoming non-performing. So if you've got that sort of a crisis, then if banks are putting pressure on farmers, farmers are being pushed to sell, then the likely buyers are obviously overseas owners. And that is where there is a major gap in legislation, because the government is just saying that dairy farmers are expected to get through. It's done nothing substantial to tighten the legislation to protect productive New Zealand farmland from being sold and transferred to overseas owners. So we are facing the prospect of a double disaster if the dairying slump continues and flows through to the rest of the economy, and if the government's very lax laws around overseas land sales mean that huge tracts of productive land are sold offshore. In China, in Switzerland, in Canada, the USA, Argentina, Thailand, Japan, Ireland, India and Korea, there is much stronger legislation which bans the sale of farmland to non-country owners. So, Mr Speaker, if the government tightened the laws on overseas ownership, there would likely to be a substantial increase in interest in leasing land. But so while this bill in itself might seem non-controversial, the fact that the government has failed to prevent the sell-off of farmland to overseas interests and adequately control that means that this land transfer bill is potentially going to be used more, or the land transfer process will occur more often, and that is a major gap in the law which needs to be plugged. So the Green Party is supporting this bill to Select Committee. It doesn't address that major problem with overseas ownership of farmland. Thank you.